pull up a chair and join us at the Energy Roundtable.
Welcome to Energy Roundtable, another episode without Lisa, and jury's still out on whether it's better or worse without her, but we'll give it another try. My companion again this week on the Energy Roundtable is our Director of Engineering, Mr. Bill Davidson. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Good to see you.
Good to have you as well. I know you have a lot on your plate, but appreciate you carving out some time to talk about the news of the day. And I will start, I will go from more serious to less serious in my articles. So my first article is from a little news organization called Al Jazeera. They're the ones that picked it up. I think it actually came through Bloomberg, but regardless, the headline is EU proposes ban on Russian coal imports after atrocities. So, and I think the key player here is Germany. So Germany had, prior to this, had blocked any embargo of Russian energy, presumably, because they are so, tied into everything that comes out of Russia. But now they are in discussions with the EU about actually banning Russian coal. And really, the pretense here is that the Russians have committed war crimes in Ukraine, and this is causing things to really ratchet up. And really, I think what it's saying is that the European Union is saying, well, we're willing to suffer the consequences of higher costs, and the article goes on to talk about that, in the hopes that this will deter Mr. Putin and convince him to change his ways. And I think the action, if it comes to pass, is like a 4 billion euro a year loss for Russia. There is a wind down provision that will allow these those who do burn it to come off of it. And there's another point here about how this is driving up the price of coal to over $200 a ton. So really that's an 8% increase. And it's interesting, we talk to folks who are connected all over the world, and this has a cascading effect. I mean, South Africa is seeing the price of coal go up as a result of Europe's desire to be independent of Russian fuels, which means they're sucking harder on the rest of the world's coal reserves. And that's how markets work. Demand goes up, and unfortunately, price goes up if supply doesn't keep pace. Anyways, moral of the story is this article really points to the importance of energy independence, and more importantly, it points to the importance of we got to get this conflict resolved, mostly for the people of Ukraine as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's a good one. I wonder if this will be also an impetus for them moving more away from coal in general. You have to hope that this is, that moving away from coal and natural gas is not just a temporary thing until we get, a resolution in Ukraine, but it's a long-term, we're not going to be dependent on such a, another country, but also, somebody who's a bad actor. But yeah, energy independence will become increasingly important for sure. Right on.
And your first article?
So my first article, I think, is a fun one. I decided to pick something that was a little out there.
Cool.
And in this case, it would literally be out there because it's an article on a UK proposal to build solar power plant in space.
Oh, now we're talking. Cool.
So it's from phys.org, and it is called a solar power station in space, ? How it would work and the benefits it could bring. So I like this one. I've been looking at this for quite a while, because because it's fun, it's space age. Idea's been around for quite a bit, but it's kind of one of those, I feel like it's one of those sort of bathroom thoughts. It's like a conclusion that you can't help but arrive at when you're taking a look at energy sourcing, because you think about much of our energy is derived ultimately from the sun, of course, fossil fuels, hydropower, wind, obviously solar. Yes. The only non-sun derived ones that I know of are nuclear, geothermal, and tidal. So it makes sense hypothetically to use solar power as the most direct route, cut out the middleman. But of course, Earth-based solar requires that the sun travel through our atmosphere, which is a problem. So wouldn't it be great if we could capture solar power outside the atmosphere and then transport it down to the surface? It sounds pretty exciting, but obviously there's challenges. So there is another advantage here too, in that hypothetically it can be 24 hours a day sunlight compared to anything on the Earth's surface. So what's the proposal look like? It's a massive space station, I mean massive, that orbits around the Earth covered in solar panels, as you might expect. So it would be 1.7 kilometers in diameter and weigh about 2,000 tons.
Wow.
It's huge. It's huge. So this power would be transmitted via radio waves down to the ground. But here's another maybe limiting factor here. You need a ground-based receiver, and this receiver would be around 6.7 by 13 kilometers. So,
wow. Yes.
So this probably makes more sense if it's offshore.
Right.
And obviously this satellite, going back to the satellite itself, it would have to be flown up in pieces. And the assembly of it is proposed to be done by robots in orbit. Again, it sounds a little crazy, but apparently it's alleged that we have this technology. So very good. And for this size of satellite, it would be expected to deliver 2 gigawatts of power. And for comparison, the UK's capacity right now is around 76 gigawatts.
Okay.
So main challenges. A big one is wireless transmission. I mean, that's the way it's got to be done. We're not going to put cables up there. It's not that efficient right now. So that is a bit of a roadblock. Because remember, the whole point was to avoid the atmosphere. The atmosphere is still in the way technically.
Right.
And you could say that there's not weather to affect the panels, but that's Earth weather, right? The truth is, when you don't have the protection of the atmosphere, you got solar and extrasolar radiation coming in, and everything will degrade faster than it is on the Earth. And of course, you probably know that space debris is an increasingly bigger problem every year. Okay, so the project's happening right now. There's this one. There's a U.S. one called the U.S. Space Solar Power Project. It's in development, and the U.S. Naval Research Lab has actually done some testing in orbit. Already, yep. And China has a station in progress. I don't think they've done any testing, but they're supposed to be up and running in 2035. And this UK one, again, no testing has been done, but they're expecting to be up and running by 2040. So the whole point of this is to get to 2050 net zero GHG goals. And I just want to say, is this going to help us get there? I'm skeptical. But there's also a lot of room for improvement with respect to leaps in technology that hypothetically could drive costs down and those efficiencies up. So hey, you never know. Anyway, I thought it was fun.
Well, that's a great one. I mean, as you know, and as our listeners likely know, I'm a avid Star Wars aficionado, and what has always fascinated me about Star Wars is how much of the world is interstellar and in space, and how much happens kind of in orbit, right? And so doing more and more in orbit is just so fascinating to me. Do you know offhand how far away from the Earth's surface would something like this?
I didn't see in the proposal. I was thinking about that. Which orbit is there? Because there's all these ones. There's the geocentric and there's the geosynchronous. There's all these different ones that they go farther out for communication satellite and farther in for things like where the space shuttle is going, where the stations are. But where in those, which orbit is it in? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Are we talking like 5 kilometers? Are we talking 50 kilometers?
Oh, it's going to be more like the latter. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking we move DC current a long ways on Earth here. Like, why are we farting around with microwaves? Can't we just, get 2-aught cable and just.
So this is another great subject. I don't think we have time for it, but it gets into the idea of the space elevator, right? Mm-hmm. So getting a taut cable into orbit it's theoretically not impossible, but we don't have the materials for it, because the best proposals we've heard as of late, and I might be out of date on this, but are carbon nanotubes, right? So but the problem is kinkage. So as long as these things are taut, they're really, really strong. You get a kink in them and they become worthless.
I see.
It's the only thing that's even theoretically that exists that we know of that could undergo the type of strain that we're talking about here. So it's kind of a non-starter at the moment, but hey, I love it. If we can find that material, it'd be great.
Wow, interesting. Solar power in space makes sense. I'm sure we'll get there. You know what's not in space? Eagles. Eagles are not in space. But my next article is about eagles. It is now this is, for our certain listeners, this is an ABC News article, so it's mainstream media. So, take it as you will. But I believe it to be true. The article, the headline is Wind Energy Company Kills 150 Eagles in the U.S., Pleads Guilty. So for our international listeners, our Canadian listeners, the eagle is kind of a big deal in America. It's the symbol of their country. It shows up on a lot of their coinage and dollar bills and things like that. And a wind energy company was sentenced to probation. Didn't know you could do that to a company, in order to pay more than $8 million in fines and restitution. And so you can read it in the article. It's a subsidiary of NextEra. They had to plead guilty to 3 counts of violating the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. For those of you who are John Dutton fans, this is not Montana, but it did happen in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And it's a criminal charge. I thought, criminally charged in America if you harm eagles. And so there were 8 states involved. And essentially, what's happening is they're flying into the blades of the wind turbines, and they're killing these eagles. And the article goes on to say it's somewhat ironic because Joe Biden is pushing for more renewables, and yet they're killing the signature bird of America. And they are a bird that already is threatened, right? I think they're trying to rebuild their population. But I don't know if it goes on to say that. I think really there are certain things you can do with the technology and warding off, birds, and it doesn't talk about that in the article. But it's an interesting, it's more interesting article than really anything technical. But we always hear about bats and things like that. But to hear about eagles and bald eagles and golden eagles in particular, feel badly for the eagles. Mm-hmm. Also feel badly for the wind turbine developers. It's one of those things like. Right. Yeah. I probably shouldn't say more for fear I get in trouble.
Yes, you might get canceled over that. But it's an interesting one because I've never heard about any specific bird. In this case, eagles is obviously important because of symbology. So that is interesting. But it is. When you look at the perspective, like I don't want to minimize it at all, but I don't know if 150 is that many, to be honest, and I don't know what time period that was either. Did you say that? But
it's over a year. Like it's
okay. But it's funny when you put it in perspective. Like I love it when they do these comparisons and they talk about the biggest killer of birds in the world, which is house cats. And they talk about and that is, and I'm not anti-cat, I'm just saying you got to put these things in perspective, right? And they kill billions, it's with a B, birds every year. So whenever I hear about wind turbines killing hundreds or thousands, I always think, okay, but I mean I don't like that, but at the same time, and when you put it in perspective, it's not that big a number. And as you say, presumably we're working on deterrence and ways to scare these animals away, or at least make sure that we're not in migratory paths and doing what we can.
Well, and I guess what we're saying is that, no, I won't say that, but the eagles are who's advocating for the underrepresented birds that are also dying, right? Like, who's advocating for their voice? Presumably it's not just killing eagles. There presumably are, falcons and seagulls. Well, nobody needs to advocate for seagulls. Nobody's advocating for those birds. But what you're saying is that it's not, you don't have to worry about the wind turbine developers. It's people have to watch more Sylvester and Tweety kind of thing. Right?
Oh, man. Yes, I don't want this to be taken out of context because I'm not saying I'm not saying anything about the morality of having a house cat or anything like that. So, but we just have to. It's all about perspective and numbers, and it is something we should be thinking about. Is what does it mean in the grand scheme of things to lose 150 birds? 150 rare majestic birds is a tragedy, of course.
And they are truly majestic. I've seen them in the wild. They are unbelievable, beautiful creatures. So
They're huge too.
they're huge. They're massive. Yes. So, anyways, now I have an urge to watch Saturday evening Looney Tunes cartoons. As was my tradition growing up. Anyways, your final article.
My final article. I thought we should do this one just because it's the business we're in. It's from the Globe and Mail. And the title is Suncor to ditch solar and wind assets, focus on hydrogen and renewable fuels.
Wow.
The headline kind of says it all on this one. Suncor started in 2002 partnering with Enbridge on a renewable project. They did 8 wind power projects since then. They've stated that this change in their mind will make it easier for them to achieve their net zero 2050 GHG goal. Because the way they look at it, it's better to shift to technologies that are adjacent to their core business. And what does this mean? What does the change to? So they're talking about transferring that money into low emission boilers, carbon capture tech,
Cool.
Hydrogen, and renewable fuels. And they on the fuel side, they talked about aviation fuel, but they also talked about MSW, municipal solid waste, to cellulosic ethanol, which is biofuel.
Yes.
And they're also sticking with gas-fired power production with cogen.
Cool. We've heard of that. Yeah. Nice.
Yes, we have. And they also mentioned in the article that they're looking at renewable power purchase agreements to reduce the carbon footprint. But a lot of people are doing that. But anyway, they just mentioned that. So there's already been articles after that with a bunch of backlash, and it does probably look like, from a PR perspective, a little bit bad with the IPCC report coming out, because the report specifically said, we need to be shifting to wind and solar as their way out of this. But I'm also wondering that, I didn't see any numbers, but I can't imagine this is a huge transfer of funds to them. Like, I don't know that dollars-wise these projects make up a huge part of their portfolio, but I'm not sure.
No, certainly not in the grand scheme of their energy assets. But if wind farms, that's not a small dollar either. We're probably 8-9 digits, I would guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So. Cool. Well, that's I love the term you talked about, adjacent to their main business. Like, it's, when they did wind and solar, it's like, well, and when anybody, who's not in wind and solar as a prime business does it, it's like, well, you got money lying around, you're going to just pay for penance. But now it's like, okay, we're transitioning our business from, we know how to handle molecules here, let's figure out how they handle molecules here. I really, from a strategy perspective, that's exciting for me. So very cool.
For sure.
Is that they're accepting offers now, or is there a timeline on that transition? Or
I didn't. They said it was immediate. It's effective immediately, because they're actually, they have a contract that's ongoing right now that they're getting rid of their stake in it right now. So
okay, wow, very good, cool, awesome. Well, always never boring in our space in the news and notes, as the world changes daily. And we will conclude our time together with our face-off. If you have not already wagered, call your bookie, make a bet. A window is closing soon. And to facilitate, to referee, to do what he does best, our man behind the glass, Mr. Mark Charbonneau. Mark, welcome.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
I'm hoping. Oh, you see my mannequin back there?
No, I don't. No, we don't. Oh. We see this. We see the solar panel orbiting your Earth in the shape of the CEM.
Is that what that is?
Oh,
yeah.
I've got. Actually, I was going to mention I could listen to you guys talk about birds for the next 10 minutes if we want to do that instead. That was pretty entertaining, actually. But our topic is, I guess we could do pros and cons of birds, but we'll stick with legalized gambling, which was the original topic.
Right.
I'm not a gambler, either legally or illegally. So you guys I'm completely neutral on this topic. Usually, I try to stay neutral as much as possible. But this one, I'm not a gambler. So
interesting.
So who won last? Bill won last. So I'll let you call it, Bill. Heads or tails?
Heads, please.
Heads. It is tails.
Okay. All right.
So legalized gambling, pros and cons.
So I will go last this time, and I will choose pro legalized gambling.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. All right. So Mark, we did talk about being time conscious. So I'm gonna set a timer for myself, just so you know.
Okay.
And sorry, Matt, you said pro, right?
You are con.
I'm con. Okay.
Legalized gambling.
So I'm against legalized gambling. Right on. Okay. I have some points here. I'm gonna try and get through them in a couple minutes here. So, is it possible for gambling to be enjoyed in a responsible way? Of course it is. Is the fact that something can be okay for some people a reason to legalize it? Well, obviously not. So let's look at the negatives. Gambling is a source of a legit public health situation, both physical and mental. We have studies going back decades to support this. It's an activity that's fraught with addiction, ruined lives, ruined families. Let's look at sports betting. It has all those negative points I just mentioned, but additionally has this component where betting has disrupted and sullied the reputation of the sport itself. We know of the historical cases, but how many do we not even know of? Casinos, they bring this promise of tourist dollars to the establishment as well as to the local economy. But how does that actually work out? Does your local casino achieve that goal, or is it primarily just redistributing that money from the poor to the rich in that locality? And that leads to what my major point is here. Doesn't this just come down to a question of freedoms and personal responsibilities? I would say no, because there's this extra, extremely important element to this. The practice itself is simply predatory. It's a tax on the lack of math skills. I'm sure you've met people in your life that are convinced they have a surefire way to beat the system at a particular game that clearly has a negative long-run expected value. It's also a tax on people with real psychological illness. In Ontario, where we are, and I'm sure this is the same everywhere, the numbers clearly show that this disproportionately affects the poorest and the least advantaged part of our society. I think we'd all agree that we're okay with restricting personal freedoms when those freedoms include taking advantage of others unfairly. For instance, we allow speech that we disagree with, but we don't allow fraud. And to me, this is clearly analogous in this situation. And we're also okay in our society to restrict freedoms for the protection of the public health. So, in the wake of the massive body count of ruined physical and mental health, bankruptcies, imploded families, we have this ethical question of whether or not we should be protecting the public from a practice that is knowingly based on deception, and it takes advantage of our most vulnerable people. I'm all for making money, but how about we go about making it in a more ethical fashion? Thank you very much.
Okay, right at the buzzer too.
I'd like to draw the judge's attention to a little bit of exaggeration with the use of the term body count. I think that's a little bit far. I've been to the casino once or twice in my recent years, and I have not seen any bodies strewn in along the aisle.
Everybody likes hyperbole, Matt. Come on.
Well, perhaps mainstream media, but not an energy roundtable. I'm trying to get every edge I can. So
I'll overrule it. I'll overrule it.
So I think, Bill has made some good points as it relates to, the evils and the perils of gambling. Certainly, like other vices, it can lead folks down a dark road. But the debate was not pro or cons of gambling. It was legalized gambling. There's a minor adjective in there. And I come at this from the premise that it is going to happen regardless. And so, if it's going to happen, I would like the government to generate tax revenue from things like that, as opposed to my hard-earned income. I think it's better to generate a tax that way. And then that tax, if handled appropriately, can then go to, ideally, if managed properly, can go back into, regulation and, providing safeguards around it. I think if you don't legalize it, then it's going to happen. It's going to happen in a manner and with people leading it who are not well equipped, who have ulterior motives, who will be taking advantage of people. Whereas I think the government is not perfect, nor is it a white knight. But I think the beauties of our democratic society that we live in will protect against abuse and can put in some regulations to help out people, to help govern it. And help provide supports that are needed. And so I think, like tobacco, like marijuana, like alcohol, I think we've tried experiments of banning it and not legalizing it, And I think, we've had some bumps in the road in terms of legalized cannabis, I think. But I think over time we figured out how to handle it. And yes, so there will always be your, judge's poker game, to quote Rounders. But I think if we legalize it, we're going to get more streamlined. We're going to get it. And I think the jury's out. We have some local casinos here, and I do think there is a stimulant to the local economy. Certainly there are people that are getting richer, but I think it is a stimulant to the local economy. So I think my main kind of tenet is it's going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. And so, the government, should get their piece of it, of such a vice, if it's going to happen regardless. And I will go on to say that, Mark, you say you're not a gambler yet you took a job with CEM. So some might say that was a gamble. It's a gamble that paid off, in my opinion, hopefully for you and certainly for us.
That's true. That is true. And I guess that would be considered a legal gamble in a way too, right? So,
yeah, that's right. Of which the government get their pound of flesh.
Exactly. Unless you guys want to pay me under the table, then we can just omit the taxes, and I'll just say.
If the CRA is listening, I will not entertain that under any circumstance.
Of course, I'll omit that as well. Okay. This is a close one because I'm fairly neutral, but I'm gonna have to agree with Matt on this one.
Nice job,
controlling it and taxing it and dumping it back into our economy is probably better than, the underground taking it and who knows what they're going to do with it. So, close one though.
Good. Great topic. Not at all related to anything we talk about a lot. So, great topic. Love the debate. Thank you both for another good energy roundtable. Always fun. We will meet again next week, and who knows what we'll debate, who knows what we'll talk about, but we'll be together. Until then, to our listeners, stay safe and look forward to. I'm about to launch next week, Mark. I'll follow up with you, my takeover of Energy Radio, to talk about some exciting new technology advances in the energy world, and I will keep people in suspense. So if you know me, you might be able to guess what the topic is. But until then, to our listeners, to Mark and to Bill, thank you very much. And to Lisa, all the best as you continue to take care of your newborn. So thanks, everybody.